This hearing will come to order. We're on Washington time, so welcome to our 10 o'clock start this morning. Certainly appreciate all of your patience. We had votes that were called early in an extended vote series, but appreciate you hanging out for some very important issues for us. The chair does note the presence of a quorum. The Subcommittee on Public Lands and Environmental Regulation is meeting today to hear testimony on several bills that will fall in our jurisdiction. On the agenda today are four bills. H.R. 414, Mr. Young, to provide for the continued release or eventual conveyance of certain federal lands within the boundaries of Fort Wainwright Military Reservation in Fairbanks, Alaska. H.R. 1839, by myself, to designate certain federal lands in the San Juan National Forest in the state of Colorado as wilderness and for other purposes. The Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Act of 2013. H.R. 2430 by Mr. Pasquale to adjust the boundaries of the Patterson Great Falls National Historical Park to include Hinchcliffe Stadium and for other purposes, Hinchcliffe Stadium Heritage Act of 2013, and H.R. 3606 by Congressman McClintock to permit certain activities to be conducted on federal land within the immigrant wilderness in the Stanislaus, am I pronouncing that correct? Stanislaus National Forest in the state of California, at the level at which such activities were conducted on such land before the wilderness designation and for other purposes, labeled as the Immigrant Wilderness Historical Use Preservation Act of 2013. Under the rules, the opening statements are limited to the chairman and the ranking member. However, I ask unanimous consent to include any other member's opening statement in the hearing record if submitted to the clerk by the close of business today. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Mr. Grijalva, would you like to make an opening statement?
Mr. Chairman, for the sake of expediency, if there's no objection, just to file my statement for the record.
Thank you, sir. Because we have a lot to cover, I'd like to get started. Three of today's bills were introduced by members of this committee. Unless our schedules do not permit them to stay, we will hear their statements. We will then turn to their bills. Our first witness is Mr. Pasquale, whose bill H.R. 2430 would expand the boundary of the Patterson Great Falls National Historic Park to include Hinchcliffe Stadium. Mr. Pasquale, please proceed. Thank you for being here, sir.
Chairman, to the committee, still good morning. Chairman, ranking member, members of the committee, I thank you for holding this hearing today on Hinchcliffe Stadium Heritage Act. I appreciate the opportunity to testify. It's so important for people in New Jersey and the nation. H.R. 2430, the Hinchcliffe Stadium Heritage Act of 2013 would adjust the boundaries of the Patterson Great Falls National Historical Park in my hometown of Patterson, New Jersey, to include historic Hinchcliffe Stadium. It overlooks the Great Falls of Patterson, directly adjacent to the current boundaries of the Great Falls National Historic Park. It was built by the people of Patterson as a public works project in 1931 and in 1932, and named for Patterson's mayor at the time, John Hinchcliffe. Hinchcliffe holds the distinction of being one of the best and the last surviving stadiums in our nation to have hosted Negro League baseball. During the 30s and 40s, the New York Black Yankees and the New York Cubans called Hinchcliffe home. These games featured future Baseball Hall of Famers such as Patterson's own Larry Doby, the first player to break the color barrier in the American League. Hinchcliffe also hosted events, and this is what's many things that are fascinating about the stadium. Every sport except hockey was played there. You name it, and it was played at Hinchcliffe Stadium. It was utilized by the Patterson Public Schools for high school sports as well. The Patterson Great Falls National Historic Park Act, which passed the House in 2007 and became the law as part of an omnibus public lands bill in 2009, established the park. As it was originally introduced, this bill included Hinchcliffe Stadium within the park boundaries. This language was replaced during the legislative process with a provision calling for a study of the stadium's historic significance. The study concluded last year, resulting in a much-deserved National Historic Landmark designation for Hinchcliffe Stadium. I believe that Hinchcliffe Stadium's legacy is inextricably intertwined with the mission of the Patterson Great Falls National Historical Park, which tells the story of Alexander Hamilton's drive to create our nation's first planned industrial city. And there's always a little competition going between Paterson and Lowell, Massachusetts, as to which was our first industrial city. But we produced 25 products, they only produced 2. So anyway, it's a standoff. The modern labor movement began in Paterson's silk mills, when workers fought for 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. Hinchcliffe tells the story of what we will. The human side of the workers who came to Paterson to work in mills through waves of immigration and great migration. Hinchcliffe is the embodiment of Hamilton's vision for an industrial economy powered by free labor and immigration, not slavery. As I've discussed in my meetings with National Park Service Director John Jarvis regarding this legislation, Hinchcliffe Stadium and its unique place in history present a sterling opportunity for the Park Service to meet its stated goal of reaching out to urban communities. The legislation would vastly enhance the significance of the Great Falls National Historical Park and draw in new audiences for our national parks. It is true that the stadium currently sits in a state of disrepair. I'm being charitable. It has been out of use since 1997, when Paterson Public Schools, the property owner, could no longer keep up with the maintenance costs. The stadium has been listed as one of the country's most endangered historic places by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. This legislation will not place the burden of restoration or maintenance on the National Park Service, which, as we know, already faces a significant backlog of such work. Instead, this legislation is intended to draw private donations, as well as the state and local investments to make the necessary improvements at Hinchcliffe. The stewardship of the National Park Service will provide certainty about Hinchcliffe's future, facilitating fundraising efforts. It's a great place. The historic district is a place right 3 minutes from City Hall, the second highest falls east of the Mississippi River. You would never think to find that in an urban setting, and you would never expect to find Hinchcliffe Stadium there either. So I'm asking the committee to pass this legislation, and I'm certainly open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pasquale. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, sir. Mr. Holt.
First of all, I just wanted to put in a word that this is something that all of New Jersey cares about, even though the teams that played there had the name New York. This is.
We're used to that, aren't we?
I wanted to ask the gentleman how much repair is likely to be needed, given that this has been idle for many years now.
Well, since '97, tremendous amount of repair. We've already started fundraising, which has proved to be very, very successful. It means it's very meaningful, since so many sports were played there, so many activities, so many concerts. So it's not, in many areas, it's more, it comes to mind quicker when you mention Paterson than the Great Falls. People who played there, who entertained there, of course, are all over the world. So we're talking about a lot of money to fix this place, there's no question about it. And as I said, we're not asking for the money. What we're asking for is a designation to help us raise the money.
And since the historical park has many aspects, there's industrial revolution, there's the historical part, there's the scenic part, there's the
Residential?
a marine part, the invention of the submarine.
That's right.
I suppose you're maintaining that this sports fits into the diverse nature of this
I mentioned that in my presentation, yes, Congressman. That's exactly, people, the mill workers had to do something. And of course, many times there's a whole history, of course. Books have been written about what happened at the falls on either side. Poetry, from poetry to art, right alongside of this great industrial revolution. And I'm proud to live there all my life, and I think that this is an important endeavor for the Congress.
Well, I think we should commend our colleague for his persistence in this effort, and this, I think, will help round out what is already a fine historical site. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Any further questions from the committee? Ms. Pasquale, thank you so much for your comments. Feel free to join us. If you would like to be able to sit in, you're certainly welcome. I know you may have some other obligations, but you're open to sit with us for the balance of the hearing.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and thank you for your kindnesses. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, sir. If we could have our next panel seated, Mr. Pena, Mr. Jones, Mr. Bloom. The next piece of legislation is my bill, H.R. 1839. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to be able to sit in the chair. Currently, Congressman Bishop, who normally chairs, is at another committee hearing. Thank him, actually, for bringing this bill to this committee's attention today. It's H.R. 1839, the Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Act of 2013. And I would like to be able to welcome Scott Jones, representing the Colorado Snowmobile Association. Thank you for your testimony today on this important legislation. And I'd also like to thank others who have traveled here from Colorado to be with us today. A friend of mine, Ed Zink, who has worked tirelessly on this issue in La Plata County. La Plata County Commissioner Gwen LeCault. I didn't see Gwen here this morning. I know she was with us yesterday. And I would also like to recognize and appreciate having San Juan County Commissioner Scott Feckenheier here, as well as Jeff Wyden and representatives from Trout Unlimited. The Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Act 2013 would generate a long-term management plan for the Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Area and the Hermosa Creek Special Management Area. Hermosa Creek is one of Colorado's most beautiful scenic areas and has long been treasured by the local community and by the countless visitors who have explored that region and all that it has to offer. When it comes to land use designations, I support a balanced approach that includes respecting the environment that we all deeply value while making sure that the best use of our natural resources are available as well. Recreation, preservation, access, and job creation are all important aspects of the multiple use management for which these lands are truly intended. I'm a firm believer that land use designation should be driven with a balance of local initiative and consideration that public lands belong to all Americans. Such is the case with Hermosa Creek Watershed, where I've worked with local citizens and groups and Senator Michael Bennett to put forward a plan to permanently protect the area while maintaining access and multiple use of the land. The Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Act has truly been a locally driven effort and has broad community support. Because the bill has been carefully crafted to preserve the Hermosa Creek watershed and multiple use recreation and the opportunities it provides, it has received the endorsement of numerous local stakeholders, including snowmobilers, anglers, hunters, mountain bikers, and other outdoor enthusiasts, elected officials, grazing permit holders, miners, water users, and Southwest Colorado residents. Under the Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Act of 2013, much of the land will remain open to historic uses, including mountain biking, motorized recreation, hunting, fishing, and selective timber harvesting. Grazing will be permitted in the entire watershed. This legislation ensures the areas currently open to snowmobiling on the Mullis Pass will remain open for future use. This will benefit outdoor recreation enthusiasts and continue to provide an important source of economic activity for the area. If this bill is not passed, then snowmobiling will cease in this region following the end of this winter season. This act also contains important provisions that allow for active land management in areas designated by the bill as necessary to control wildfires, insect infestations, and disease outbreaks. The Region 9 Economic Development District of Southwest Colorado strongly supports this legislation and believes it will retain and create better jobs, foster economic growth and sustainability for an area where tourism and recreation is absolutely critical, and assist with improving the overall quality of life in Southwest Colorado. In addition to District 9, the bill is supported by the City of Durango, the La Plata County Commissioners, the Southwestern Water Conservation District, the San Juan County Commissioners, the Colorado Snowmobilers Association, Joe Grant Mining Company, and many others. At this time, I'd like to be able to submit for the record letters in support of this legislation. These are some of the letters that we've received that have had broad areas of support. The diversity of these stakeholders speaks to the importance of the Hermosa Creek watershed to the region and to the community consensus behind this effort. Together we can preserve this special place for future generations. I would again like to thank Chairman Bishop for convening today's hearing and having the opportunity to be able to address this issue, and for all of you being here. With that, we'd like to begin with testimony on this bill. Testifying is Mr. Pena and Mr. Jones. We thank you for all of your efforts on this, and all of our witnesses, your written testimony will appear in full in the hearing record. So I ask that you keep your oral statement to 5 minutes. When you begin to speak, obviously the green light will come on, the yellow will come on with 1 minute left, and when you see the red light come on, if you could conclude your remarks, we would appreciate it. Mr. Pena, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and provide the Department of Agriculture's view on H.R. 1839, the Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Act of 2013, and H.R. 3606, the Immigrant Wilderness Historical Preservation Act of 2013. I'll begin with H.R. 1839. The department supports H.R. 1839. It would designate 107,886 acres of the San Juan National Forest as the Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Area to protect water resources within the Hermosa Creek watershed, which supplies residents of the Animas River Valley and the city of Durango, Colorado with clean drinking water. Of the 107,000 acres, 68,000 plus would be designated as the Hermosa Creek Special Management Area. One of the bill's requirements would be the creation of a management plan for the Special Watershed Management Area. The department has concerns about the overlap of the Special Management Area Plan with the San Juan Forest Plan. We suggest adjusting the language to reflect incorporation of the management guidance as an amendment to the San Juan Forest Plan rather than creating a new planning process. The act also designates 37,000 acres plus of the 107,000 acres as the Hermosa Creek Wilderness under the National Wilderness Preservation System. This area encompasses some of Colorado's most majestic remote landscapes with many abundant wildlife species, including elk, deer, bear, and a variety of birds. It would be an excellent addition to the National Wilderness System. We'd like to work with the committee on the minor adjustments that we believe will strengthen this legislation. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to continue with the next bill or hold here?
If you'd hold on that, we'll have Mr. McClintock on his bill. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Jones, are you complete with your testimony on this bill, sir?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, for your testimony, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, members of the committee. My name is Scott Jones. I'm here on behalf of the Colorado Snowmobile Association, and I'm actively involved with the Off-Road Business Association, Trails Preservation Alliance, and several other motorized user groups in Colorado. I'd like to quickly highlight some of the components that are really important to our user groups in the legislation, mainly the release of the West Needles Wilderness Study Area, the development of the Special Management Area, and the fact that we really believe that the legislation could resolve some conflict that our users have had with land managers in the area. We believe that this is a partnership of everyone, and we really, like I said, we're hoping that this legislation can resolve some issues that we've encountered recently. Firstly, on the wilderness study area on Molas Pass, this is an important area for the snowmobile community. There's multiple users in there, both as guides. 2 active guide businesses are in the area, and it's one of the few areas where families and new riders can go and have a relatively safe and easy riding opportunity. Most of the rest of the area is rather steep and not something that the novice rider would be able to experience. So from that aspect alone, it's very important to the next generation of our users. It's an area that's been analyzed several times as a wilderness study area. And the area that will be released is an area that's been repeatedly found not suitable for wilderness designation due to the long history of motorized recreation that's occurred there. There's some boundary issues with local government properties in the area, and it's something that we hope the legislation can resolve in going forward. It's become, the legislation has become more important to us recently as the field office has released a resource management plan that identified the area as currently closed to motorized recreation. That's an issue that really took our users by surprise. Last year there was a meeting with the San Juan County Commissioners regarding possible limiting of permits for grooming and permittees on the rental business in the area that might result from the forest plan. It was really well attended, and everyone agreed that this area has a long history of motorized recreation and should be released and allowed to continue for motorized recreational opportunities. We were able to get correspondence from the field office manager to the effect that, yes, we were going to work forward in partnership in addressing this issue. We were quite surprised to see that when the final resource plan came out, it was identified as currently closed. That's just not even accurate and really didn't help the relationship between land managers and the local user groups. So we're hoping that this legislation could mitigate those types of concerns. Obviously not a good situation for anybody. And then I also wanted to briefly address the special management area. It's about 70,000 acres. Our representatives of our local clubs were involved in the watershed working group for an extended period of time. This is an important resource to us as several of these areas, or several of the alternatives in the resource plan did identify possible closure of this area for motorized access. So again, the special management area would be a very important component to this legislation for us, and we're hoping that the clarity that the legislation provides does help repair or address some of the problems or concerns that we've had with land managers in the area. So I thank you for this opportunity, and we'll welcome any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jones, and certainly, again, appreciate, I know the effort that it takes to be able to come to one of these hearings in Washington, and my fellow Coloradoans for making the trip once again as well. I think this is a fine example of being able to bring together very disparate groups to be able to address needs and concerns for a specific area down in our communities, and so we certainly thank you for your contributions on this. Are there any questions for the witnesses on the Hermosa Creek bill?
If I may.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Ranking member.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jones, you represent the Colorado Snowmobile Association. Can you also touch on the multi-use aspect of the legislation? As was indicated by the chairman, it seems that there's something for everyone in this legislation, and maybe you could emphasize that point.
Absolutely. The wilderness study area currently directly abuts a town or municipal property that's really heavily used by pretty much everybody, skiers, snowshoers, and that type of a winter recreational perspective. The groomed trails that are maintained by our local club are the primary method everyone uses to get into the backcountry there. And there's a lot of heavy snowfall, and really just simply traveling into the back, a few acres of the property is difficult at times without the groomed route that runs through there, and that groomed route would be lost without this legislation. The multiple use recreation on the special management area These are trails that everybody uses, motorized, mechanized, motorcycle users. Personally, as a hunter, I welcome any trail that I can find when I'm removing my elk or deer from the backcountry. So, I mean, I can say from that perspective, it's got a lot of value to that user group as well.
Thank you, Ranking Member, and I'd like to follow up on that because I think, as you know, Mr. Jones, this has been a unique collaboration from very disparate groups that are going on, and to that end, what about this unique process can serve as perhaps a model for other communities, both in Colorado and other states, dealing with complicated natural resource management issues?
I think the collaborative process that was used here is great. I actually had the opportunity to be in Lake Tahoe a couple weeks ago for they're starting some forest planning and management with the collaborative outreach type efforts similar to what was done here. And I think that's the way we really need to develop plans. It's a slow process. And it can be difficult at times, but I really firmly believe that in the end, the final product is very good for everyone. And we're actually starting to look at some of this type of management for another wilderness study area up outside of Walden, Colorado, that we would hope to be able to release and then bring in more management to the area to allow for better user experience for everyone.
Great, I appreciate that. You know, in your opening statement, you mentioned the importance of winter recreation as a vital economic driver for local communities in the Mullis Pass area. How vital is the outdoor tourism industry, including snowmobiling, to the local economies of our area in the wintertime?
This motorized usage in Colorado contributes about $100 million a year to the Colorado economy. And I am going to kind of flagrantly steal a statement of one of the guides that was operating in the Mullis Pass area. He informed everybody at the county commissioners meeting that his children represented, I think it was 20 or 25% of the local school district. So it's just, and if he was not able to keep his guide business going, that he would have to move someplace else. So, I mean, it's that level of significance, I think, would be a very good summary.
Providing some of that access actually helps support our children as well. So, if snowmobiling were restricted in the proposed Hermosa Creek Special Management Area, can you describe for us how this would impact local businesses in the surrounding area during the wintertime?
Unfortunately, I don't have an exact number for you. It would be significant. The terrain in the area is rather steep and difficult, if not impossible, to ride. And these areas that we're talking about in the legislation are lower, flatter, more user-friendly, I guess would be the way to put it, areas that are frequently used by the motorized and non-motorized communities simply due to the topography and also due to avalanche concerns. The steepness of the terrain really creates quite a few concerns from an avalanche perspective and basic safety of users. So the areas that we would be addressing in this legislation are areas that would be highly valued for users and traveling to that area.
Great. Well, thank you again. If there are no further questions from the committee, again, I'd like to thank you two gentlemen for addressing this specifically and appreciate your testimony here today. Our second bill is H.R. 3606, Mr. McClintock's bill that protects historic uses in the immigrant wilderness area. Mr. McClintock, do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and the subcommittee for hearing this bill today. In 1975, Congress designated 113 acres of the Stanislaus National Forest in the Sierra Nevada mountains as the immigrant wilderness. At the time it was enacted, its sponsors in the House and Senate, the Forest Service, and the wilderness groups supporting it all promised explicitly that this designation would not interfere with traditional activities such as horseback riding and packing, hiking, hunting, fishing, and camping. Unfortunately, as we'll hear in testimony in a few minutes, these promises are being systematically broken by the U.S. Forest Service. As restrictions on use have become increasingly onerous, public visitation of the wilderness has dropped dramatically, as much as 50%, according to one report. Now, new Forest Service restrictions are threatening the livelihoods of several local companies that have provided pack services in this area for generations. H.R. 3606 redeems the promise made to the public at the time of the wilderness designation and freezes permitted use at the levels that existed when the wilderness designation was made in 1975. It allows the Forest Service to restrict use above that level, but forbids it from restricting use below that level. This specifically refers to camping and its associated activities, including pack stock support. And I might add that this sort of human activity has been going on in this region literally since prehistoric times. Unfortunately, as we've come to expect from the Forest Service under this administration, they're opposing this measure to guarantee the public's access to the public's land. They say it would, quote, set commercial use at the highest level measured between 1964 and 1974. This is hogwash. The text of the bill is crystal clear. It freezes the level of use at the time when the wilderness was designated in 1975, period. That was the promise that was made at the time. And the fact that use has dropped 50% since then is a measure of the exclusionary and restrictive policies of this regime, precisely what this bill seeks to correct. Further, the Forest Service charges that this would restrict priority to commercial use at the expense of public use, or rather would give a priority to commercial use at the expense of public use. But commercial use is a public use. These are small businesses like the Bloom family that make it possible for the public to use this land without having to buy their own horses and pack mules. A bizarre and radical ideology has sprung up within the Forest Service that reasons that small enterprises like the Blooms that seek to eke out a modest living by helping the public to enjoy the public land is evil and must be stamped out. That radical ideology is on full display here today. Just to be clear, there is nothing in this bill that provides one group priority over the other. This is entirely an invention of the Forest Service and would only happen if the Forest Service wills it. Nor does it in any way eliminate the agency's ability to manage or set conditions for these small family businesses to operate. It simply assures that the Forest Service cannot reduce visitation below that which occurred in 1975, when the population, by the way, was about half of what it is today. The subcommittee and the full committee have repeatedly taken notice of how the current Forest Service management is subverting Gifford Pinchot's vision for the national forests, which he expressed through his maxim, the greatest good for the greatest number in the long run. In one tiny corner of the national forests, this bill makes a modest step toward redeeming that mission. And I will look forward to working with future administrations and with this committee to assist in the changes at this agency that will be necessary to fully restore Pinchot's vision of our national forests. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McClintock, for your statement. During this panel on H.R. 3606, we'll be hearing from the Forest Service and also from Mr. Bloom. I'd like to begin with Mr. Pena for your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From the beginning of the wilderness movement, Congress and the Forest Service recognized that commercial services played a role in achieving the purposes of the Wilderness Act. By providing access for the visitors, commercial outfitters help the public experience wilderness, provide educational opportunities, and assist the Forest Service in tasks such as trail clearing and trash removal. Pack stock is a valuable and integral part of the wilderness experience, and the Forest Service supports its use. The Immigrant Wilderness is a popular wilderness destination contiguous to Yosemite National Park. There are many opportunities for the public on its 200 miles of trail, including a portion of the Pacific Crest Trail. Some of the Immigrant Wilderness still includes cattle grazing allotments. There are 2 pack stock commercial outfitters within the wilderness that would be affected by this bill. The department fully supports protecting the unique wilderness character of the Immigrant Wilderness and ensuring that it retains an appropriate array of activities and levels of public access. However, the department cannot support H.R. 3606 as proposed. The legislation essentially prioritizes commercial services in the immigrant wilderness over non-outfitted public recreational use. Such an action would also prioritize commercial use over the protection of the area's wilderness character. The legislation would set commercial use at the highest level measured between 1964 and 1974, allowing for the largest amount of commercial use ever recorded in the immigrant wilderness. The agency needs the discretion to be able to adjust commercial use levels along with overall use if needed or warranted to preserve wilderness character. Preventing the agency from applying its expertise to adjust management because of resource management issues or to comply with other legal requirements such as those in the Endangered Species Act could result in litigation to resolve the contradictions created by enactment of this legislation. We are working with Mr. McClintock's staff and the committee to address concerns of the administration and to better meet the stated objectives of the proposed bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on H.R. 3606, the Immigrant Wilderness Historical Use Preservation Act. This concludes my prepared statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Pena, for your statement. And Scott, I did want to point out we aren't holding you hostage at the table. If you have somewhere else you need to go, you're certainly welcome to stay. Mr. McClintock, would you like to introduce Mr. Bloom?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bloom comes to us from my district. He operates a family business on the Stanislaus, one that goes back, as I understand it, to several generations. The bill comes to us at his suggestion and request, and with that, I'm pleased to introduce him to the subcommittee.
Please proceed with your testimony, Mr. Bloom.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. I am joined here today by my son, Spencer Bloom. I come before you today as a board member of the National Forest Recreation Association and the owner of Kennedy Meadows Resort and Pack Station. The National Forest Recreation Association was formed in 1948 and represents recreation businesses located on or near federal lands throughout the United States. My family has been visiting, living, and working in the immigrant wilderness since 1927. My grandfather and father inspired a love and respect for the wilderness that I have proudly passed on to my children. Our family business, Kennedy Meadows, has been in operation since 1917. We offer pack trips into the immigrant wilderness in Yosemite National Park. We provide stock support for hikers, fishermen, hunters, horsemen, and people with disabilities, and folks from all walks of life and experiences. I come to you today to urge your support for H.R. 3606 and help protect access to these long-honored traditions and historic uses. The immigrant wilderness is located in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. It is bordered by Yosemite National Park to the south and the Carson Iceberg Wilderness to the north. This area lies entirely within Tuolumne County and is approximately 150 miles east of San Francisco. The immigrant wilderness encompasses 113,000 acres, ranging in elevation from 5,000 feet to 11,570 feet. In 1931, the Immigrant Basin was designated as the Immigrant Basin Primitive Area, and on January 4th, 1975, Congress designated it as the Immigrant Wilderness Area. In 1975, public support for designating the immigrant as wilderness was overwhelming. There was, however, concern by the public that wilderness designation would lead to restricted access of traditional activities such as horseback riding, hiking, hunting, fishing, camping. Congressmen, senators, wilderness groups, and the Forest Service all assured the concerned public that designation would not impact these traditional wilderness uses. In 1974, Senate Report 93-1043, Senator Haskell stated that the immigrant wilderness is an area where a true wilderness experience can be enjoyed. He also said this area is characteristic of the untrammeled portions of the Central California Sierras. It offers fine trout fishing, good hunting, wonderful scenery, and peace and quiet for those seeking solitude. Here, wilderness hiking, riding, and camping are at their best. On October 8, 1973, the Committee on Public Lands held a hearing on proposed designation of the Immigrant Basin Primitive Area as wilderness in this very same room. Harry Crandall, the Wilderness Society, testified that the proposed wilderness area receives much use, yet retains its wilderness quality, and with few signs of man noticeable. Here, indeed, a man is a visitor who does not remain. The imprint of man's work is barely discernible, and in the few places where it exists, it is impermanent. Since the designation of the immigrant wilderness in 1975, use has changed significantly. Visitor use across the board, and especially horse use, has dropped as much as 50%. All user groups have adopted lighter impact philosophies. Leave no trace, and overall appreciation of wilderness values has increased significantly. And despite all these facts, radical wilderness groups and many wilderness managers within the Forest Service continue to levy heavier and heavier restrictions and regulations. Since passage of legislation creating the immigrant wilderness, these promises have been broken one by one. The Forest Service has placed more and more restrictions on use. Radical groups have filed lawsuits against the Forest Service for allowing traditional uses in wilderness. Major national wilderness groups have sat by quietly and allowed smaller and more radical groups to promote their very restrictive interpretation of the Wilderness Act. Wilderness management planners have adopted a purist philosophy that severely restricts traditional uses such as campfires, stock use, cross-country travel, fishing, hiking, and many other activities. Some examples include in the John Muir and Ansel Adams wilderness areas and in Yosemite National Park, it is now illegal to take your stock more than a quarter mile off of a system trail. This eliminated 70% of the area from access by horsemen. As a result of a lawsuit filed by wilderness groups, packers on the east side are restricted to one pack animal per 2 customers. Campfires are illegal in most areas. Grazing of pack stock is not allowed in most meadows. Within the immigrant wilderness, Forest Service management plans call for heavy restrictions of campfires and create huge areas where any sign of man is unacceptable. It's just as important that Congress and the public protect wilderness from an encroaching civilization, as well as protecting it from overregulation and restrictions that lead to diminishing support for the national wilderness system. Aldo Leopold said it best, "The time is upon us when a pack train must wind its way up a graveled highway and turn its bell mare into the pasture of a summer hotel. When that day comes, the diamond hitch will merely be a rope. Kit Carson and Jim Bridger will only be names in history. If once in a while a man has a chance to throw a diamond hitch and travel back in time, he is just that much more civilized." Mr. Chairman, I think if John Muir and Aldo Leopold were here today, they would tell you that their vision of the wilderness did not include a ranger giving them a citation for riding their horse off the trail or sitting around a campfire. We owe it to the next generation to protect access to our nation's wilderness areas and ensure these historic traditions continue. I'd like to conclude by thanking the chairman and the committee and the members for the opportunity to speak with you today and urge your support for H.R. 3606. Thank you.
Mr. Bloom, thank you for your testimony. I'd now like to open it up. Are there questions for Mr. Pena or Mr. Bloom? Mr. McClintock?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bloom, you've been described as a commercial outfitter. Explain your commercial enterprise to us, will you?
As a commercial and outfitter and guide, we provide stock support for different types of groups. We take, say people are hiking into the mountains, we'll pack their backpacks in for them so they can get a start on a pack trip without having to carry the load so far. We take people on horseback on tours all through the immigrant and Yosemite wilderness areas.
And without you, if I wanted to go horseback riding, I'd have to bring my own horse, wouldn't I?
That's correct.
And that's a pretty huge expense and a lot of wear and tear on the roads in the back country, is it not?
It's true. Yeah, it's very expensive to have your own stock. Staying in the wilderness area.
And yet you are expressed by the Forest Service to be something very different than public use, when actually what you're doing is making it possible for the public to use the public land without having to own their own horses and their own trailers and their own mule teams. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. Every one of our customers is the public.
Mr. Pena, you say that this prioritizes commercial use over non-commercial use. Would you kindly point out where in the bill it says that?
It has the effect of doing that by,
Where does it say it?
doesn't say it.
It doesn't say it
It
because it
says-
would be entirely up to the Forest Service to make that determination itself. That is not a matter of the legislation. That is a threat made by the Forest Service that is the way it intends to administer these public lands. Is that not correct?
I don't believe so, sir. I believe what the intent of our testimony is it points out the effect of the legislation of holding commercial.
Your
use as-
agency's policies have already driven public visitation of this wilderness area down by half. That's despite the fact that the population of the state's doubled since the wilderness designation was indicated. How does this square with Gifford Pinchot's vision of the national forests being administered for the greatest good, for the greatest number in the long run?
The numbers that I have indicate that the permitted numbers for commercial use haven't changed significantly since 1975. The permitted numbers for the Kenny Meadow operation, I understand, in 1975,
Well,
24.
If that is the case, and that is disputed from the testimony that we already have, and I would like to get the numbers so that we can pin that down, but if that's the case, why would you have any objection to a measure that simply says keep the visitation at the level that was experienced when the designation was originally made back in 1975?
The Wilderness Act identifies that commercial activities are allowable to the extent that they're necessary to provide for additional public use.
Well, if I'm not wealthy enough to own my own horse and my own trailer, why shouldn't I be able to go to Mr. Bloom's family and say, hey, I'd like to rent a horse from you so that I can enjoy the wilderness area just the same as somebody who can afford his own horse and his own trailer and all of the support that goes with it?
And that's why we support outfitter guides.
But you don't. You're
Yes, we
waging
do.
war on them. This is why this bill is before the House.
Right now, the information that we have indicates for the last 5 years, the actual permitted use trips into the wilderness by both permittees were significantly less than half the permitted number.
Mr. Bloom, you're actually dealing with this agency on a day-to-day basis. What's been your experience?
Well, what's happened is over the last, maybe 10 years or so, is wilderness management and the Forest Service have taken up a purity doctrine where every time they write a management plan or make a management decision, their goal is to move the wilderness towards a more pure state. And it's gotten to the point where the only way to achieve more purity is to reduce use and place heavier and heavier restrictions.
Yes, look but don't touch. It's no longer greatest good for the greatest number. It's now look but don't touch. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes.
You testified that visitation is down as much as 50%. Where does that figure come from?
Well, a lot of that is just because of a trend that we're seeing nationwide, that wilderness use is lower than it was in the 70s, and that's just because people want to go to the wilderness.
Well, people don't go where they're not welcomed, and it sounds like increasingly they're not being welcomed to the public lands.
Well, that's true. I've had numerous customers that after they've gone to areas for years and years, and then when they're not allowed to have a campfire anymore or something like that, they just quit going. And it was no longer the wilderness experience that they loved for years and years because it was ruined by regulations and restrictions.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, this is a agency that is begging for a complete overhaul.
Thank you, Mr. McClintock. Now recognize Ranking Member Grijalva for his questions.
Yes, Mr. Peña, with the global climate change that we're seeing, our natural resources, public natural resources, have and will continue to change. And therefore, the management of these resources are likely to change as well. And do you feel that this legislation that we're on at this point would restrict the service's ability to adequately manage, adapt to wilderness area changes in the future? And
Yes, sir. We think that by taking away the discretion of setting up levels that would be able to be maintained in concert with the capability of the land as over time and use patterns that may change over time, we have a potential of seeing increased use in the area that adversely affects the resources that the wilderness areas are intended to maintain. They're intended to maintain them in a natural state with a minimum presence or indication of man's presence. A number of the things that happen over time are difficult to recover in these types of environments, generally at higher elevation, that don't recover from heavy use very quickly. And those set patterns that over time definitely change the character, and it makes it difficult to meet the wilderness intent of having a minimal impact from man's use.
In terms of direct effect, how many stations, PAC stations, are being affected by current Forest Service policy? Do you, 5, 10, 15?
In this particular wilderness area, there's 2 PAC stations.
And
Nationally, we have about 5,000 outfitter guides that work across the United States providing service to the public.
okay. And the other thing is, as I understand, and I could be corrected, the proponents of the legislation want to bring back the levels of horse packing, backpacking that existed prior to the wilderness designation 40 years ago. Any comment on what impacts that would have on that designation if we go back to what those levels were?
It's difficult to say, and I think it's fair to say the biggest concern we have with this legislation is it ties our hands to be able to make any adjustments. When you look at the use data from both PAC stations going back to the 80s, the late 70s, and what we have data for on the 2000s, there has been the highest use that we had recorded is in the 1980s. That was all, even then, was below the permitted numbers.
Okay.
And so we think we have some room before we start to see the permitted numbers being a constraint on the operation.
Thank you. Mr. Bloom, in your operation, is the demand such now that you don't have enough permits available to you to be able to satisfy public's demand for the service?
No, that's,
Nobody's being turned away?
nobody's being turned away now. No, that's not really the issue. The issue here is to try to, in part, protect the Forest Service from lawsuits that we've seen in surrounding wilderness areas.
And the point that was made, and that's the point that's being debated, that the wilderness area access would be, the priority would be given to commercial operators, I guess in this instance, 2, over the rest of the American public. Do you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
This legislation is absolutely for the whole public, and that's why it talks about camping and horseback riding and
All right.
hiking. It's not about only commercial outfitting, it's about the whole general public.
So and the answer is no, and I appreciate and understand that. So can you tell me, how can the Forest Service then be expected to manage a wilderness characteristic designation if Congress is mandating certain levels of access, i.e. the 40-year threshold? How can we accomplish the wilderness designation and protection and a mandated 40-year level up to?
Well, the idea of the bill is not to try to increase use, it's just to make sure that use isn't limited in the future. The wilderness is in so much better shape than it was 30 years ago, just by people's attitudes. It would make the Forest Service try to use education instead of regulation in management. It's easy to restrict stuff and close stuff. It's a little more challenging to try to manage the public to get the same results.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Grijalva. Now recognize Mr. Young for his questions.
First, I want to thank Mr. McClintock for bringing this to the forefront. All due respect to Mr. Pena, the Forest Service and the Park Service have started a regime of restriction. Now, I happened to be here when we passed this bill in 1975. It was unanimously supported by the Forest Service, by the users, by the legislative body. Everybody agreed that there would be continued use at the level at that time, preserving it as it was. And unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, the Forest Service personnel changes about every 4 years. So you get a little college graduate that believes in the green beautiful he has control over, and it's all his. And this gentleman here, although he's been doing it since 1917, 1927, is no longer acceptable in his mind. In his mind. So I'm suggesting this legislation should be applied to other wilderness areas because they've gone back on their word. That's long before your time, sir. It's not directed at you. It's a general policy of the government management of lands. Keep the people out. It's the king's lands. Don't let them come upon those lands. Keep it in pristine fashion, and you can use it because you're the ranger. So I compliment the gentleman for what he has introduced. And if we, as the representatives of the people, don't recognize that there is an ability and should be the ability of the government to work with the people. But the Park Service doesn't work with the people. The Forest Service doesn't work with the people. The Fish and Wildlife doesn't work with the people. The BLM is beginning not to work with the people. And this is all the people's lands. The idea you can't go fishing without a permit. The idea you can't have a campfire. The idea you can't hike without going through the king's men is not the way this country should be run. And that bill was created right in this committee. I was sitting down there, by the way, right in this committee, with the idea that everybody was happy with it, but it never at once did we think that our government would go back on the word that we all accepted. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm suggesting this type of legislation to be applied to every wilderness area where we see a decline in public use. This is not the agency's land. It is the people's land. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Panel, thank you for your time and for your testimony on these issues, and you're certainly free to sit back in the audience or attend the rest of the hearing. I'd like to invite up our next panel. It is going to consist of Stephanie Toothman, Associate Director for the National Park Service, Paul Kramer, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army, Richard Aaron from Land Mineral Surveys, and Renee Staley, Site Manager for North Star Alaska Housing Corps. If you please take a seat at the table. Thank you all for taking time for your testimony that you'll be giving us here today. I'd like to begin with Stephanie Toothman. She's Associate Director of the National Park Service, giving testimony on H.R. 2430. Ms. Toothman, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present the views of the Department of the Interior on H.R. 2430, which would include Hinchcliffe Stadium within the boundaries of Patterson-Great Falls National Historical Park. The department would support H.R. 2430 if amended. The inclusion of this historic stadium within the park boundary would facilitate the National Park Service's role in preserving and interpreting a nationally significant cultural resource associated with the history of African American achievement and racial integration. By including the stadium within the park boundary, the bill would bring this iconic property under the provisions of the Parks Enabling Act that would authorize the National Park Service to enter into cooperative agreements with the owner to identify, interpret, restore, and provide technical assistance for preservation. The bill would also enable the National Park Service to accept the donation of the property. Hinchcliffe Stadium is a 10,000-seat Art Deco structure that was built as a public works project between 1931 and 32. It served as a venue for professional and amateur baseball, automobile and motorcycle racing, entertainment, and school athletic competitions. In March 2013, 4 years after Congress authorized the Patterson-Great Falls National Historical Park, Hinchcliffe Stadium was designated a National Historic Landmark. The stadium's national significance is tied to its history as a Negro League baseball venue between 1932 and 1944, serving as the home field for the New York Black Yankees, the New York Cubans, the Newark Eagles, and others. As cited in the National Historic Landmark Study, Hinchcliffe also derives its significance from its integral role in the social history of the city. Many of Patterson's silk and other mill workers formed teams and played in the stadium, making it an important part of the fabric of community life in industrial Patterson during the Great Depression and in decades beyond. Hinchcliffe Stadium is owned by the Patterson Public School District. In May 2013, the school board voted unanimously to support legislation that would include the stadium within the boundary of the park, with the proviso that the school district not relinquish control of the stadium or require National Park Service acquisition of the property or permit the National Park Service to acquire or manage the stadium without the express support of the school district. The school board and the National Park Service are in agreement about the desirability of maintaining ownership of the stadium by the Patterson Public School District. We believe that the role of the National Park Service with respect to the stadium should be limited to providing interpretation, education, and technical preservation assistance. For that reason, the department would support H.R. 2430 only if the bill was amended to prohibit the National Park Service from acquiring ownership of the stadium. We would be pleased to provide the committee with the recommended language. Finally, I wanted to let the committee know that the department will be submitting statements for the record for two of the other bills on today's agenda. One statement is for H.R. 1839, the Hermosa Creek Watershed Protection Act, and the other is for H.R. 414, the Fort Wainwright Military Reservation Conveyance. These bills are not under the purview of the National Park Service. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my statement. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Toothman, thank you for your testimony on the Highcliffe Stadium bill. Do any members have questions for Ms. Toothman?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Grijalva?
Appreciation. Many of us in this committee have been advocating, myself included, for a broader inclusion of historic places and landmarks across this nation that represent the diversity of our nation. And this is a good example, and appreciate your support for it. It's a chapter, not of segregation, but it's an important historical chapter that the rest of America needs to learn from. I think that your participation in this is very important. Your support is as well for the stadium. The clause that you would want included in the legislation that would essentially be a prohibition of ever acquiring the property as a unit, for lack of a better word, is, if you could elaborate as to why you would want that prohibition in this piece of legislation.
I think for two reasons. One is I think it's consistent with the community and the school board's desire that they retain control. And secondly, that makes it very clear in terms of what our role is in terms of supporting it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have some questions.
Chairman Bishop?
All right, so the Park Service wants to run it, they just don't want to fix it and own it.
No, just to be clear, we want to clarify our role in terms of supporting them, in terms of providing interpretation, educational, and technical assistance, and by including them within the boundaries, that brings them under the provisions in the act establishing Patterson that gives us significant authorities to enter into cooperative agreements.
How's that different than what I said?
I'm sorry, I think I was just being clear in terms of what I said, but I hope,
You don't want to fix it, you just want to give tours.
We want to support them in their efforts to fix it through providing technical preservation
How much of the park
assistance.
do you actually own right now, the rest of Patterson Park?
Right now, we don't own anything. We expect to have transferred through donation one small parcel of about 5 acres. And our expectation, although the GMP remains to be completed next year, is the target date, approximately 9 acres within the 31 acres of the park's boundaries.
So you expect to own 9.
That's an expectation. It's not a reality at this point.
How many acres are involved in the park, in the stadium?
I don't have the exact figure for the stadiums. I believe it's about an acre.
Mr. Chairman, I voted against the establishment of this park in the first place, but this stadium actually fits the purpose of what you should be doing. This is the good part. The rest of it, I have a statement I'd like to submit for the record, because this is a truly historic area, that any place in which Larry Doby can play and be from Patterson, I understand, is worth remembering, and I would yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Any other questions for Ms. Toothman? With none, our last bill on today's agenda is Mr. Young's bill to extend the lease on housing facilities at Fort Wainwright in Fairbanks, Alaska. Mr. Young, do you wish to make an opening statement?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for holding this hearing today on an issue that concerns the ultimate fate of 400 unit communities in Fairbanks, Alaska. As the committee well knows, I strongly believe in solving problems. As such, I hope this hearing will help the U.S. Army and North Star Alaska Housing Corporation come together to solve this problem. Last year, I introduced H.R. 414 to continue the conversation on how to preserve and protect an important neighborhood in Fairbanks from eventual destruction. As a bit of a background, in 1987, the Army entered into a Section 801 build-to-lease housing contract for 400 home community on 76 acres of land. These homes consisted of 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units, a maintenance and leasing facility, associated roads and parking areas, landscaping, 18 playgrounds, and a central heating system, including 39 boiler houses, are an important source of housing for military families in the local area. This group of homes is more than just housing of a neighborhood, it is a community. The housing lease on this Section 801 contract expired in 2007, and the ground lease is scheduled to expire on June 26, 2018. Without an extension of the ground lease,